The Wildfire in the Teardrop Valley. I was fresh out of high school, and I had just passed my entrance exams for college. I was excited, but I still had 2 years of Union service ahead of me. I had options, of course. I could have joined the Union Army, or the Union Domestic Service League. I was just short of the aptitude score for being able to join the Union Healthcare Alliance. I didn't want to fight the rural insurgents, so I joined the UDSL. I suppose it was 6 of one, half dozen of the other, though. I was being sent to a relatively rural area of California to fight the wildfires. The wildfires, we were told, were allegedly set by the insurgents. The first thing they do when you enter the UDSL is shave your head. No, I'm joking. Actually, for being a semi-paramilitary-like organization, they really couldn't care less about your personal appearance, your personal views, or wearing the correct uniform. Our equipment is a mismatch of old and new gear, made here and abroad. Our unofficial symbol is WW, and it stands for our unofficial model, whatever works. They demand a fairly low bar for physical fitness and discipline. Honestly, I went to summer camps with more rules than this. They do, however, take your smartphone and freeze your social media accounts for the duration of your service. I missed the memes the most. I missed out on making so many great ones at the time, too. They also scrutinize anything you draw or write, and more or less swear you to a soft vow of secrecy. So, unfortunately, I'm recalling much of this now purely from memory, and unfortunately not from any first-hand sources. I guess I'm getting ahead of myself. There have been so many changes in such a short time. I think everyone is still trying to get a grip on them, even now. At least that's the vibe that I got from the 12 other recent graduates from around the country as we rode an open-top military-style truck, sitting on the top of crates of bottled water and Budweiser beer in a convoy with 5 other trucks with more UDSL newbies and crates. Dust, diesel fumes, and wildfire smoke drifted about as we wound up and down the soft hills. Despite our best efforts to shield ourselves, we baked alive in the late summer sun. While the trucks were loud, and they droned out the low-flying bomber aircraft carrying water and laser-guided extinguisher smart bombs to the wildfire's front lines. I recognized the aircraft as B-52 bombers, one of the old warplanes with an enormous bomb bay, originally used to carry nukes and dozens of conventional bombs. They had been repurposed to deliver wide and pinpoint strikes of fire retardants, as well as groundbreaking bombs to create deep, barren, non-flammable fire lines. They crisscrossed the skies overhead with their pulsating engines, leaving me nearly deaf and shaken inside out as they rumbled overhead. The only thing louder than that was one of the Legionnaires, named Kyle. "It's pure communism," the badly sunburned Kyle, sitting across from me, bellowed for the 5th time. "They rounded us up. They put us into this truck to fight their fight. The Union is a communist, fascist government, and they're preying on our youth." He didn't seem to inspire anyone as he mused. "My dad needs me at his used car lot. They're literally expropriating the wealth, me, of my family. I can pay for college on my own now. I don't need this." Eventually, a dark-skinned woman with a dream-catcher earring next to me spoke up. "Shut the fuck up, Kyle. We're all in this together. Unless you want to go join the insurgents. No one made you get on this truck. You could skip university and go get a union job back wherever the hell you came from. But no one here would miss you." Kyle sunk into his firefighting outfit a bit. Came from Nashville. And no, I'm not a traitor, he said. All I'm saying is, my dad said he could pay my way, and the government, is making me do this. And that is the definition of communism. The country is on fire. I spoke up softly. There's nothing more patriotic than to help put out the flames of this place we grew up in. The place we all still have to live in. Whether it's fighting the wildfires or firefights, I don't see another option. Where the hell are you from? Kyle asked. I'm from the Chicago suburbs, I said. Why don't you go back there and take care of your shit back there then? Why do you care about California? Aren't you mad the union took you out of your community and dropped you here? These are California problems, not Chicago problems, not Nashville problems. I go where the problems are. I think about it like our great-grandparents didn't say that when they fought in World War II, they didn't say this is a France problem. They went where the problem was. Invoking World War II, that's rich. We sent volunteers to fight other socialist governments then. I slapped my hand across my face. Arguing with him was like arguing on Facebook. Utterly pointless. I come from Oklahoma, and I'll go anywhere I need to. Watching you bitch and moan about it is just the icing on the cake, the woman with the earring said. Bunch of hypocrites. We're riding in a diesel truck. Where's the green agenda now? Kyle wasn't wrong in this account. Most of the trucks I rode in convoy from the Midwest across the broken and desolate western interstates were diesel. The fully automated solar-powered hybrid transports were in short supply, and they were relegated to mostly delivering food, water, and fuel to the critically isolated areas. Not to mention the union had approved the automated trucks for human transport yet, since their programming was still subject to hostile reprogramming and disruptions to the GPS network. Anyway, here's how I understand how the union came to be as it is. Falling quality of life measures, inequality, and a rise of economic and ethnically motivated civil unrest culminated in a failed presidential election. Shortly after that failed election, the nation said fuck it, and a wide-scale, multiple-faction revolt happened about 2 years ago. Years of state-level budget cuts and massive National Guard deployments to multiple war zones overseas left the states and the federal government weak. A new Washington consensus formed out of the brief multi-faction civil conflict. The Union regime formed and took power after a soft coup and began to rule by decree after packing the Supreme Court, which allowed stand the declaration of a state of climate and civil emergency. The state of emergency was the means to implementing an aggressive counter-climate change and economic equality agenda. In more precise terms, it was the ambitious goal of simultaneously raising the quality of life for the average citizen while creating work to bring the United States into near-complete climate-friendly sustainability in the fields of energy production and agricultural consumption. Surprisingly, this group consolidated control rapidly and efficiently eliminated their enemies in the blocks of military and earned legitimacy among a majority of the urban population, which had been strained beyond a breaking point. The core of that legitimacy stemmed from their redistribution of wealth into social and job programs. They shut down speculation finance, which supported reactionary candidates in politics. They expropriated social media, which provided tacit support for racial pogroms across the country. And they seized large residential holdings to support public agriculture and housing. In reality, only a relatively small number of persons were out any meaningful resources, and most of them Flag-waving patriots, God-fearing, job-creating titans of American industry only a couple years ago fled the country with whatever percentage of their billions they could take with them, often burning or booby-trapping their remaining property as they left, and now hide in the Tricon nations overseas, supporting a flow of arms and money to the insurgents here. The redistribution of wealth provided public health care, public transportation, and a green infrastructure program focused on the rebuilding of the energy grid and public transportation. To a lesser extent, it was focused on maintaining the highways and the interstate system. Kids went to schools with smaller classrooms. People could see doctors if they were sick or injured. People no longer died in the streets from treatable illness. Adults, for the most part, worked 6 hours, 4 days a week, at various infrastructure renewal projects in their communities. Compensation just simply is not comparable before and after. Before, people worked 3 jobs, 60 hours a week, 12 hours a day, and struggled to find a place to sleep and eat. Now, with what little cash to spend freely they had, homes were guaranteed, health care was guaranteed, basic education and even higher education was guaranteed. People had free time. Families did family things together. As Kyle can attest, many people, at least on paper, were still rich in the sense they had cash, and on paper owned a business or parts of property. The thing was, there was little need for cars anymore, or for private shopping of major items like appliances. Fear traveled outside of the cities and towns, which got with the program, and when they did, they used public transportation. Most of the time, they couldn't because of the long neglected infrastructure and surges of attacks or other kinds of natural disasters. Kyle mentioned at one point the feeling of being blinded out, a poker term, meaning they were paying too much just to see the cards, and there were very few winning hands for his family. Of course, they could get jobs like anybody else, and slowly give up their worthless capital to trade and barter for something more useful. To be clear, there were no laws against private enterprise. In fact, many people used their free time to make small crafts, foods, and other novelties, or what the union called want items, and sold them for cash or bartered for them. Top want items are usually entertainment products, which simply aren't being produced because of the lack of a mass audience, or fast food, specifically, no surprise, beef burgers. Some people reopened abandoned businesses. For instance, a corporate-owned bar was left closed for months after the Civil War broke out, prior to the Union. And now it's open, run by folks who wanted to open it again, and other folks who were making infused liquor in their basement and made craft beer to supply it. Of course, much of this was also still on paper. Results varied from place to place. For all of the union's appropriation and retraining of advanced Amazon-designed production and predictive algorithms, setting prices, supply, predicting demand, commanding distribution, things still got screwy. For instance, the interstate out west was incomplete. It was in shambles compared to the Midwest, or what I've seen on the East Coast, or even in the South. At least the parts that hadn't been repeatedly bombed. The West was a string of abandoned small towns and truck stops long looted out for food and fuel. Burnt-out husks of cars and trucks betrayed a post-apocalyptic and then post-World War decimation of humanity, rather than the Union slogan, "Rebuild You" society. Nevertheless, I got the sense that there wasn't anyone out here who wanted that, even if they were still out here. The only upside was we didn't hit any roadside bombs on the journey. The diaspora of the West aside, there was a national sense that things were getting better, or they would be better soon. And again, this is where the Union legitimacy came from. Resistance was naturally still abound, especially in some of the southern states, where resisting governors attempted populist militia-run pogroms of their urban areas and of Union supporters. It was, at worst, a low-key civil war, purely ideological and perhaps even theological. Ask any of the insurgent-friendly families if they wanted good jobs with housing, health care, and time with their children, and they say yes. Ask them to join the Union, and they inexplicably grab any weapon at hand and use it against you. Still, the conflict was low intensity and low lethality compared to the sudden uptick in climate change-related natural disasters. New Orleans and swaths of Florida and Texas were underwater, and hazmat zones as a form of mutated toxic algae had contaminated thousands of miles of beachfront property and lowlands with a deadly poison. The Northeast had been repeatedly smashed by Category 3 hurricanes, doing damage to the New York skyline like 10 9/11s. The Midwest is perpetually digging out of tornadoes and hurricane-strength thunderstorm fronts, not to mention the Civil War has taken root in the suburbs, with areas of food supply running scarce as semi-truck runs from ports to the Midwest stores are frequently targeted by roadside bombs. The West Coast is dry and as flammable as gasoline. Outside of the United States, the Tricontinental Coalition, or TRICONs for short, has attempted to economically isolate the United States as punishment for decades of climate change denial as well as international aggression. Ironically, despite a century and a half of intervention in Latin America, several leftist regimes in South and Central America now back the Union, and the Union has pledged the remainder of its military strength to support these regimes against the fascists in Brazil, and as a way to counter the fact that Brazil is destroying the last of the rainforests there. 2 years into Union rule, the results are a mixed bag. Again, for emphasis, the early Union days cut both ways. 2 cuts towards hope and 2 towards fear. That's all I know about my world. But as many would say, this is what I chose to believe. I don't think anyone really knows what is going on, and many, like my new loudmouth friend in the truck, chose to believe something very different. I believed at the time that my goal should be higher education, but it was formed by my parents' old days' insistence. I suppose I could have been very well off, settled closer to home, working on one of the urban renewal projects. But ultimately, I consider myself to be a student of history, and I was on a quest to tell the story. Maybe not this story, but this is what happened. The before and after and during, and the choice between a single frame and traveling the country, jumping from hotspot to literal hotspot seemed like a better story to tell, if not also flawed and incomplete. I guess, well, this is the part everyone wants to know about, right? What did I see of the Red Terror? What did I hear? What did I see? What did I do? For me, the terror started long before the Union came to power. I think many of the critics of the Union forget how we spent months hiding in our basements, hiding at home, checking our phones to see if we could go back to work, go back to school. We forgot how much time we spent waiting to see if we could go to the store. We forgot staring at empty refrigerators. We forget all the time we spent in the food lines, or being warned away from a food line because of an unknown threat. We forget about how much time we spent biting our nails while watching reruns of old Major League Baseball games on regular TV. If you must know what I saw of the terror, quote unquote, I once saw a live stream of a cadre-directed lynch mob hoist a doctor on a traffic pole about 10 blocks away from my home. What I heard was the cadre was punishing cash-only doctors who refused to take a position in the Union health clinics, and they were using this man as a warning to others. What I heard is another story. The cadre apparently had a family member she was close to die because they couldn't afford their insulin. The Union sent another cadre back by Paris then to punish the original cadre leader, officially for unsanctioned violence on the working class and crimes against specialized union labor, i.e. a doctor. She was then lynched as a warning to other cadre against using their position to take revenge, as inexact as hers was. Shortly after, that cadre was also replaced and a new one came into power over the area. Mom and Dad were pretty shocked about all of it. They were not exactly articulate on what they found philosophically objectable to the Union. They didn't resist, though. They didn't protest. They took the new Union jobs and they wished me well. They were happy to see me go. They thought I was safer in the UDSL than at home. I didn't write to them while I was away, and they didn't write to me. I don't know if they viewed me suspiciously or not, if they were so browbeaten by the rapid and dangerous changing world around them into accepting the Union line, I guess as most people honestly were. I went from the home into the UDSL feeling like a clean break from the nest. We came to the staging area, finally, which was a relatively safe zone where refugees from the massive fire were also being gathered. Formerly, it was called the Union Relief Compound 446. Some of them were from the local rural areas, but most of them were being shipped in from the overcrowded centers near the burned-down suburbs of Los Angeles and other high-density communities. And taking a look around, I suppose this is actually what most of the afflicted U.S. looked like. My suburb was relatively intact despite the extreme weather, but areas around me were like this. A combination of fire, sirens, red and blue strobing lights, and endless rows of tents and trailers. Endless rows of people sitting outside their tent or trailer, wondering where it all went. If anything was left, will I ever be able to go back to see what's left? Will I ever be able to go back to the home and life I had? There were large tents, filled with yet more people, listlessly munching on waxy, military-style meals ready to eat, and a few bartering for a few bottles of soda or beer. Kids in dirty and ill-fitting clothing running around screaming, while others cried in the corner. Most are still wearing white dust masks covered with markers to make the masks look like animal mouths and noses. Most of the adults, young and old alike, had some kind of alcohol or cannabis product clutched in their hands or pressed to their lips. The camp smells not only of smoke, but of sweat, urine, and occasionally a sickly sweet disinfectant. There are a few Union paras posted around the camp. They wear shorts and short sleeves, but also bulky body armor around their chest. Not to mention their black hoods and face-covering smoke masks accompany their sleek black submachine guns. They wander in pairs with their heads held as high as they can. They were congregated around the Union commissary where anyone with anything could trade for whatever supplies the Union managed to ship in. There was already a line forming for the Budweiser beer we were sitting on in our trucks. Most of the men and women lined up had fists of yellow labor coupons indicating they lent so many of their hours performing some sort of community task in the camps. I guess it was a Saturday, as the digital screens overhead announced topics for class tomorrow as first aid for 3rd through 5th graders and basic concrete construction for 6th to 7th graders, and then dignity and rights and justice in the workplace for 8th graders. The Union never missed an opportunity to teach and train future builders, future medics, and what was largely called architects of fairness. We got as settled in as we could be in the small cabins meant for 4, but we were packed to the walls with 12 in each cabin. We had some very basic training for firefighting, and honestly, more about procedure. I was there rolling out my standard issue sleeping bag on the floor, next to the sunburned Kyle and the Dreamcatcher woman when a whistle rang out. We were programmed from our week's worth of training to rush out in any condition we found ourselves and fall in line outside. Our new UDSL commander, Captain Burke, blew into the yellow whistle until he was blue in the face waiting for us to assemble outside. We lined up, arms at our sides, in various states of alertness and dress. He had salt and pepper hair and shrapnel scars buried into his face. He walked briskly in front of us, back and forth 3 times before he took 2 steps back and glared at us with clenched teeth and eyes hidden beneath an army cap. He let out a loud hiss between his teeth before he announced his favorite number, Five. Five, five. I spent 5 tours in the Middle East, 1 in Iraq, 2 in Afghanistan, 2 in Iran. You're the sorriest bunches I've ever seen. 5 is the number of minutes I expect a cabin of 12 green firefighters to fall out in order. You had 5 minutes, 55 seconds. That's 55 too many. Hell, if you were 5 seconds too late to report to Iran, we'd figure you were dead. Now let's get this straight. This isn't merely a suggestion, it's a necessity we get this right next time, because the next time it may save your life, as you were dismissed. Captain Burke was approached by 2 younger persons. They wore the signature dark green shorts with red seams and green button shirts with red shoulder boards. These were the Union cadre, the political and ideological support, and the shot callers who operated in both a military and civilian capacity. They were notoriously difficult people to deal with, but mostly that's because their job was so difficult. There was no easy way to translate the objectives of the Union to local action in ideal conditions, much less when the world was collapsing into fire around you. They were at the razor's edge of hope and fear, and I think to any observer, no matter how they operated, they were somehow wrong or inadequate. Back home, for example, they were deployed to manage difficult ideological conflicts as philosophers, only to get beat up like nerdy kids for their lunch money. Then the next day they would come out, flanked by at least 2 paras each, deployed every 3 blocks like some sort of occupational force. Out here they took complaints from the locals, the victims, the refugees, the commanders, and then, when called for support, they got flack from Washington for failing to be consistent or for delays in implementation. Just because I understand them doesn't necessarily mean I want to be one, even though I suppose I was on the path at the time to maybe become one. Just because I understand them doesn't mean I'm necessarily too sympathetic to everything they do either. I watched them closely as I filtered back into the cabin to arrange my things. Captain Burke was glowing red in the face as he leaned into the cadre, who stood firm, if not defensively, tightening their grips around their smart pads as Burke launched into a tirade against them. I knew whatever orders were in translation were not good, and I had a bad feeling about what was going on. I took an inventory of my equipment as Kyle tried to hide the fact that he was peering out the window at the unfolding conversation between Burke and the cadre. "Oh my God," Kyle muttered. "They're gonna execute us." Everyone in the cabin seemed to groan at this assertion. "I've got to get out of here," Kyle said as he stripped down to his boxers and undershirt. He grabbed a pair of shorts from his personal stash and a watch he had hidden in his personal first aid pouch. Then he made a beeline for the back window, which he struggled to get open. To my surprise, the woman with the dark hair and the dreamcatcher earring went to help him escape. She calmly asked for a Jack and Coke if he was going to town for a beer run. Kyle only replied with a shaky voice asserting our certain imminent doom. He climbed out the window and disappeared down low the hills and into patches of brown vegetation towards the main refugee camp. "I'm not going to miss him," the woman said as she shut the window behind him. "The only person going to get killed is him." The cabin seemed to murmur in cautious agreement with her. "Don't you agree, Louie?" She turned to me and used my name. I panicked a little because I don't remember giving my name to her. My face must have betrayed this fact as she smiled. "You don't remember me, do you? From Washington, the National Advanced Placement History Seminar from 2 years ago? You were giving a presentation on U.S. populism and Native American relations. You got some things very, very wrong, but I could tell your heart was in the right place." "No, I'm sorry, I don't remember you." "That's okay. I was only there one day before my high school was ordered by the governor to pull out of the conference. He said it was unpatriotic to attend. My name is Gasca Rivers." "Oklahoma, you said? Cherokee?" "More than Elizabeth Warren," she chuckled. "Also, in case you were wondering, it means rain." "What?" "My name." "Oh." I stood up and took a long look at her. "Well, We could definitely use some more of that right now. Okay, well, is that it? She asked me as if I lost myself in a trance of her overwhelming beauty and intelligence. No, maybe you could enlighten me about what was wrong in my presentation. That's the worst pickup line I've ever heard. I mean, you could have gone with something like, about my name, heritage, earrings. Maybe, yeah, but did it work? I smiled at her. I didn't think dream catchers were Cherokee. You're right, they're not. I suppose it's actually cultural appropriation. But I've been expected by whites to have them for so long. I don't know. I guess I think it just looks cool too. I suppose, if nothing else, that's what matters. Depends on which cadre you ask. Ha! I doubt any cadre would dare to ask, much try to street shame a Native American these days. They do seem to have bigger fish to fry, by which I mean the Kyles of the world. 2 whistles, followed by 2 more whistles, meant double time back to the assembly point. This time, we fell out. On time this time. All 71 of us assembled. Captain Burke had no words of praise. Double time means double time. 2.5 minutes to assemble, not 3 and 12. We'll work on it. I've got out for at least 4 months out here. And we will have this remedied before you leave. Now, I need 6, that's right, 6 volunteers for a special night mission. I know you're just getting settled in, so in lieu of that privilege, these 6 volunteers will be granted in exchange for working overnight, the entire day off tomorrow, and 1.5 labor coupons. Ladies and gentlemen, that beer isn't cold now, but by tomorrow it will be. If it's there at all, someone in the ranks just said loudly enough to be heard by all. The line laughed. What's that? I'm sorry, was I looking for your input? Burke ran down and put his face in the person who made the comment. I couldn't see well, but I imagine whoever said it was expecting somehow to get away with it. 30 push-ups, or else everyone in your cabin does 60. I heard a body drop on the dusty ground and started counting. Any more cute comments will be greeted with something similar. Now, do I have 6 volunteers? Burke started to count off the legionnaires who raised their hand. 1, 2, 3. Agaska raised her hand, and almost if by reflex, so did I. All right, that's 5. As Burke walked up and down the lines, 2 paras approached dragging Kyle. Kyle's eyes were streaming tears and partially shut from being pepper sprayed. When they dropped him, he was still spitting and gagging on the chemicals. Hot damn! Burke exclaimed. Looks like I've got my 6th volunteer right here. Mr. Kyle Reed, looks like I've got all the prerequisites of a mission of this variety. The rest of you, as you were, 6, walk with me to the motor pool. You and you drag him. Burke pointed to me and Agaska. Smooth, Louie, really smooth, Agaska said as we tried to swing Kyle up and over our shoulders. When was the last time you pulled an all-nighter? Only a couple months ago, I lied. Well, I'm not going to keep your ass awake. Maybe your ass will keep him awake all by itself. Kyle choked out his joke as Agaska, and then I let him drop. Gross, she said. United Domestic Service League. UDSL. More like United Dick Sucking Lips, right? Am I right? Ha ha ha. Kyle groaned. Kyle, if there's one person out of all of us the UDSL will throw into the re-education, it's definitely you. Bullshit, Kyle said. There's much more worse than me around. Before we knew it, we were in another large military-style truck winding up and down more shallow valleys and short hills. The dirt roads gave way to what appeared to be a recently paved and marked roads without speed limits. I didn't know where we were going at the time, but we were moving at a clip as the sun began to set. The air mercifully was cooled a bit, and it was almost enjoyable to be outside. Agaska spoke to Kyle. What did Burke mean that you have the prerequisites for this mission? Kyle smirked and laughed. I don't know what he meant. Agaska pressed him. You did something, didn't you? You did something that prevented your father from simply buying your way out of the UDSL and right into university. Burke leaned in. Mr. Reed here was convicted of grand theft auto his freshman year of high school. So this was pre-state of emergency. Grand theft auto from his father's own lot. It was only a joyride, Kyle protested. Burke continued. He also hit 3 pedestrians on his joyride. Because according to your file, you couldn't handle your own vehicle. My dad's gift car was insulting. I can handle driving whatever vehicle he gave me, and that was an insult, Kyle protested. So you took the car you wanted, like a spoiled brat, and you crashed it, and you hurt 3 innocent people. This entire country's stealing and crashing everything because of spoiled brats like you two are in charge now. What a crock of shit, Agaska said, shaking her head. Get some new lines, Kyle. Captain Burke got on the loudspeaker. Attention! We are approaching our destination. This is your assignment. We, as a nation, are in a crunch situation. We must evacuate as many goods from the residences here as possible before the wind shifts. This is a matter of national security. We must secure the goods and commodities we can trade for food on the international market. The sanctions placed on us by the Tricons are crippling our access to necessary resources to maintain our food supply. We need these goods to sweeten the deals, so to speak, and make sure those resources continue flowing in. Without them, this country will starve. It is the policy failures of the previous regimes that have left us without the capacity to feed ourselves in the changing climate. Without the ability to trade for these materials to produce green, efficient farm implements, we will be set back from self-sufficiency in food production for at least a decade. Kyle's eyes seemed to bug out of his head after hearing the announcement. He also turned giddy and exclaimed, Oh my God, it does exist. It does exist! What? I asked. What exists? Teardrop Valley. What's Teardrop Valley? It's like a base of last resort, like in Ayn Rand. It's a secret gated community for the most wealthy tech visionaries. Well, one of several to be rumored at least, Kyle said. Something like a mix between a fallout shelter, a vacation house, Area 51, and Fort Knox for the likes of Mark Zuckerberg, Bezos, Gates, the cabal at the head of ChemCon, and others like them. Agaska started to laugh. That's hysterical. Kyle turned to her with a grimace. What's so funny? These assholes spent billions of dollars trying to hide their shit here, and they abandoned it, and now some fucking kids are gonna rob them. Agaska just simply couldn't stop laughing. I stood up and watched the truck pass through a broke, blasted concrete wall, covered in razor wire. The edges of the valley were unusually jagged, and it occurred to me that the valley was, at one point, covered, domed, presumably with something that would block its visibility from satellite. Time to see how the 1% really lived, Captain Burke muttered over the speaker. To be clear, we're looking for gold, silver, gems, jewelry, safes, hidden compartments inside these homes before the wind changes and the fire gets here. If you try to grab any of these items for yourself, I'll shoot you myself, and I'll tell everyone you died in the fire. Do you understand? I and everyone else in the truck nodded in agreement. We hopped out the back and were escorted to the perimeter fencing of the home entrenched at the furthest end of the valley. He ordered us to take cover against the concrete as a group of 3 green and red paras ran from the fortified door of the residence into a small foxhole they had dug themselves. I barely had time to cover my ears before a blast rang out, sending black and brown smoke and sand high into the air. I took out my flashlight, along with the 8 others around, and I crouched upon the opening. Burke ordered us to stay back as the paras moved ahead. The entry might be booby-trapped. As the dust cleared, the two paras investigated the hole blasted into the threshold. One of them tossed in a few rocks and ducked, apparently awaiting some sort of explosion from a trap. When no blast or other response came, he carefully hopped through the gaping hole into the structure. Two bright light panels blinked on automatically, displaying a futuristic metal and spiderweb plastic ballistic glass interior. The second para entered and started feeling the walls for an access panel to the rest of the interior. That's when the panel lights turned bright red and a klaxon siren rang out. The two paras only had time to look up before a series of explosions pulverized them from above. Two demolition experts later determined that the intruder system was damaged and activated late. They determined that it was made up of a network of Claymore anti-personnel mines rigged into the ceiling, which effectively turned the two breaching paras into chunky soup. The six of us waited in shock for an hour while a team of specialists finished disarming the rest of the mines in the security system. I was pretty quiet during that time. None of us had seen anyone killed before like that. We knew that maybe there was no way to know if the experts could disable all of the security measures, and if, in fact, we were robbing some sort of cursed tomb. I think we stared at the bloody lumps of flesh in the threshold for almost that entire hour. Eventually, Kyle asked if someone was going to clean them up before we went inside. Burke squinted at Kyle. They're a lesson. This is the violence, latent as it is, that these wealthy people inflicted upon America. They denied climate change. They distorted the political process to secure and enhance their wealth so they can go build bunkers for themselves to hide their treasures while the rest of us burn, starve, get poisoned, or blown away. Every time you open your mouth and defend them, you're not only killing yourself, your country, your planet, you're killing them too. Look upon your work closely next time you spout out that bullshit. We haven't killed any of them. We've taken no lives as we've struggled to survive, and yet they leave deadly traps. If you want to clean up your bodies, you're the one to do it. Stop apologizing for them. When I heard the phrase, "take our country back," I was hoping this is more or less what they meant. Unfortunately, it wasn't, and alternative meanings were well propagated by those with the most to lose if they ever tried. Trucks cycled in and out of the valley most of the night, extracting valuable commodities, hard drives with future tech, and God only knows what else. Probably blackmail material in each bunker as well. Despite my initial enthusiasm, I was aware of certain historical tropes in play, and that made me uneasy at the time and now. Ultimately, because those threads unraveled here and went no further, at least I didn't participate in them, and have no knowledge anyone ever did, I guess the ends still justify the means. I wasn't thinking too much about this at the time, however. It was late, but the sky was a sickly orange pale like a bad peach. The wildfire could be heard as a dull roar over the trucks and chatter at the site. A slight breeze turned the site chilly, but mostly smoke-free. I felt my stomach grumble over the bad food and the grisly sight before me. I was hoping to avoid all this by joining the UDSLs, and I started to fear there was no program, no place, anywhere on the planet where this sort of thing could be avoided by a young man anymore. This was the new reality of life, trapped under a heating dome of carbon dioxide. Even if I were to live to be 100, and all my efforts and the union's efforts were 100% successful, we'd only be stopping the global thermostat from rising any further. It was that kind of hopelessness, anxiety, and depression that a gun in your face could stop you from spiraling into a corner and sobbing over. A gun or something else in my face, I suppose, could have taken my mind off of it. I looked over at Agaska. She was looking up at the sky, at the beams of spotlights illuminating patches of smoky clouds. Her eyes traced a jet high overhead, descending towards the fire line. She was playing with a bare chain necklace with half an eggshell, her thin fingers running over points of the cracks again. I recognized that broken eggshell. It was something they gave to persons with a uterus after they were rendered irreversibly sterile in a public health care facility. It was a symbol of sacrifice, and if shown in certain locations could provide minor privileges similar to that of being, say, a military veteran. "Are you surprised?" she asked me. I let out a long sigh. "I think it's a big decision on your part." I was surprised how poorly my family took my decision, especially my mother. It's already a cultural taboo, but it's worse being part of the tribe. I've been cast out. I gave up on my right to give birth, my right, in their minds, to motherhood. I look around and I see what motherhood is like. I see my planet, and it's a mother coming into a child's room in the middle of the night with a pillow on fire and holding it over my face. But then I realize it's me doing it to myself. Us doing it to ourselves. If I gave birth, what would I be bringing into this world other than another problem for it? And the likelihood of that life having a short, nasty, brutish end. She laughed a bit. The bonus of it got me here, got me my choice of posts. A landlocked Dust Bowl girl from Oklahoma. I was thinking about the coast for so long. I had thought this in my mind that I was going to be going someplace lush, or at least most of it. And now it's just sand and dust. But I forgot. This state will be a desert long before I live to be 100. All the beaches are smothered in smoke and smog, the beautiful skyline and centers of culture blotted out, practically gassed out of existence. She turned towards me. "You know, you can relax." "Huh? I like you. Don't worry, I know I like you because I can talk to you about this. I haven't been able to talk to anyone about it. Sure, the Union thinks I'm a saint, but I'm not. I am what I am. I am like this planet. I'm making way for something new. I don't know if that something new will still be us, though." "You think this climate change is not only some sort of reckoning, but our extinction?" "Maybe." Agaska paused. "There's certainly a force at work that's keeping us from flourishing as we have. Mother Earth turns away, comes back with a torch for our home, jumps out of the car while rolling us into a lake, feeds us poison milk. I don't know. Is this like a folktale?" "No." "Well, what are you, still fucking racist?" Agaska laughed. "I'm just kidding. No, it's not tribal folklore, it's fucking Captain Planet. That Whoopi Goldberg, Earth is gone, and we sold our rings to pay rent. It's the other thing now. I can't remember its name. It's malevolent. It just wants to wipe us out and start again. All of the little political changes and struggles, it doesn't care about. It just wants us gone. It's willing to accept our help. I don't know if I helped or not." You're talking about Zarm," I said. "It's a good reference, obscure. I used to watch that show on YouTube when I was like 8. I used to check them out of our library on VHS. We had to watch them there. None of us had a VHS player in our home. We didn't have good internet connections, and YouTube was blocked at the library. Even when our VR headsets started to come in, we used to watch stuff on VHS there. That feels like a lifetime ago. Like I went to sleep and fell into this nightmare. They're two separate worlds, honestly. I remember resenting it so much, and I Worked to get myself out of that little shit town where nothing ever changed except someone we knew and fucking love died in a DUI crash. I learned so much to prepare for a world that doesn't fucking exist anymore. Agaska sighed again. I'm sorry I'm so angry, but I'm not angry at you. I know. We both prepared for so long for a place that no longer exists. Aside from helping me make a friend, I'm trying to make peace with the fact that I may never end up at university. Even if I do, it won't be for history. And yeah, I'm really super angry. I just try not to show it. "20 hours ago, I didn't even remember your name. Now I can't imagine going the next 18 months without you around. But I swear to God, if you repeat that to anyone, I'll kick you in the balls so hard you'll never see straight again." "Well, thanks. At least I know you're serious about it." She hugged me harder than I'd ever been hugged before, and I slowly hugged her back as hard as I've ever hugged anyone before. Unfortunately, our moment was ruined by a sudden flurry of activity around the mouth of the valley. Truck engines roared to life and high beams blinded us before giving way to reddish blotches of trail lights as the trucks spun around and started to exit the valley with haste. 2 UDSL leaders on site and a cadre member began to blow their whistles furiously. They began to yell as a sudden, roaring, hot wind descended upon us. "Evacuate to the trucks! The wind is shifting! Evacuate to the trucks! Clear the valley!" I could see the various legionnaires, the paras, the commanders, and more cadres stream out of the 5 cavernous bunker homes dug into either side of the valley. It didn't take me long to realize that there were far more people than trucks, and most of the trucks were already packed with valuables, and we were already streaming out of the valley at high speed. My guts sank. I realized it was probably the case that if the homes had been sealed as they were designed to be, it's likely the inhabitants would have survived the encroaching blaze, but alas, all of them had been heavily gutted. Hiding inside of them would mean certain death from heat or smoke asphyxiation, but so would remaining outside. To be continued.